We apologize for the delay. We will start the session right after we have the chairman, Dr. Plenary, with us. He should be anytime soon.
One आयो अब आयो होइन अब फिक्स छ एकछिन म हल्लाउँछु त्यहाँ हेर ठिक छ केही छैन नि ओके ल अब रेकर्ड गर है अहिले रेकर्ड स्टप गरेर फेरि रेकर्ड गरिदेऊ ल फ्याँकिदिनुपर्छ यो क्लिप ओके रेकर्ड गरिदेऊ
Welcome to the second day of South Asia Economic Summit 10. We are about to start our second plenary with the theme WHITHER SAARC, the future of regional cooperation in South Asia. We once again apologize for the delay and we thank you all for your patience. We are, now I request Chair of the session, His Excellency Professor Viswambar Pakurel, Ambassador of Nepal to Sri Lanka and Maldives, to please come forward to the stage, please. Next, I request Honorable Mr. Rana Muhammad Afzal Khan, Parliamentary Secretary for Finance, National Assembly of Pakistan, to please come to the stage. Now I request Ambassador Dr. Dinesh Bhattarai, Advisor to the Prime Minister of Nepal, to come forward to the stage, please. We don't seem to have him yet. Now I request Mr. Nazir Kabiri, Advisor to the Ministry of Finance, Government of Afghanistan, to come forward to the dais, please. Now I would like to invite Mr. Suraj Vaidya, President, SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Islamabad, to come forward to the dais, please. And I would also like to request Professor Deepak Nair, Professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, to come forward to the stage, please. I would like to thank all the distinguished guests at the audience for participating in this session. And now I request Chair of the session, His Excellency Professor Viswambar Pakurel, to facilitate this session, please.
Good morning to everybody. It's not very long that I have been in Sri Lanka, but I thought people have started recognizing me in Sri Lanka and Maldives. But I have a problem to be introduced over here. I came here about half an hour ago. But I would hear him frequently saying that because we are still expecting the chairperson of this session, we are sorry to delay. So I apologize. Being an economist, I had made some calculations and allocated a couple of minutes, considering 2 hours session. Everybody should learn a lesson from the past experience. Yesterday I was a little bit embarrassed in the sense like nobody could contribute even a second, from the floor. So I had allocated 10 minutes for the introduction of towering personalities, and then 25 minutes for the keynote speaker, and 6 minutes each to the panelists, and 45 minutes to the floor discussion. To respond to the queries, I have allocated 10 minutes, and as a chair, I have allocated myself 5 minutes. I have done this not because I'm too much anxious to express my feelings, just to safeguard my professional existence as a chairperson of this session. So without delay, we are already delayed, so this calculation may not work. Sometimes, in statistics, we say a statistical error, even if you have error, that has nothing to do for the final recommendations, So you take 15-20 minutes, delay program as a statistical error. Let us enjoy and listen to these personalities. But first, let me introduce our keynote speaker. We heard him yesterday, and I have been hearing him for quite a long time. In New Delhi also, we had been together. He is currently emeritus professor of economics at GNU. Professor Nair was distinguished professor of economics in the School for Social Research, New York, beginning 2008 through 2012. He was a vice chancellor of University of Delhi, beginning 2000 through 2005. He taught at the University of Oxford, Sussex, and also University of Sussex, and Indian Institute of Management. So he has a long profile and decades of experience. Then let me introduce the rest of other speakers as well, just to save the time. Now, one of the panelists was proposed as Meenakshi. She is absent. So now we have 4 panelists. First, Rana Muhammad Afzal Khan. The Honorable Khan is a politician and a member of National Assembly. He did BSc in Electrical Engineer and later MA in Political Science. He was also commissioned in Pakistan Army. Widely traveled, Mr. Khan had also been associated with private sector organizations. The way I am introducing you, gentlemen, I have based my information in the Google. So if there has to be something to be edited or deleted, please do so when you speak, okay? So, with due apology, Ambassador Dinesh Bhattrai, he was a career diplomat who is currently a foreign policy advisor of the Prime Minister of Nepal, a former ambassador in Geneva, looking after a host of other UN agencies. Dr. Bhattrai was also Foreign Affairs Advisor of the former Prime Minister of Nepal. He has degrees from ISS Hague, and he has a PhD from University of Delhi. He has contributed to co-author a book called Nepal, India, Democracy in the Making of what, sir? You add Europe Mutual Trust. Sounds great.
Mr. Chairman, my fellow panelists, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, I consider it an honor and a privilege to be in your midst this morning, and I would like to thank the organizers for their invitation to speak on the future of regional cooperation in South Asia at this plenary session. The past 3 decades have witnessed rapid economic growth in South Asian countries, which is impressive in comparison with their own performance in the past and with other developing countries in the present. GDP growth rates since the mid-1980s provide a sharp contrast with the near stagnation in the colonial era and modest growth in the preceding 4 decades in South Asia, and are much higher than in other parts of the developing world, particularly Africa and Latin America. This has led to a significant reduction in absolute poverty and some improvement in the living conditions of people. But economic growth has not been transformed into what I describe as meaningful development that improves the well-being of people, ordinary people. The underlying reason is the triangular relationship between growth, poverty, and inequality. Rapid growth did help reduce absolute poverty in South Asia, but not as much as it could have, in part because the initial income distribution was unequal, and in part because of rising income inequality. At the same time, economic growth did not lead to commensurate employment creation almost anywhere in South Asia, with Bangladesh as a possible exception. Indeed, employment growth was slower than output growth, and this gap widened over time. Okay? Almost 1/4 of the people on Earth live in South Asia, but the contribution of our region to world GDP in current prices at market exchange rates is barely 1/30th. Okay? It is no surprise that South Asia is home to at least 40, if not 45% of the world's poor, depending on where we draw the poverty line. For the region as a whole, in 2011, 25% of its population lived below the poverty line of PPP $1.25 per day, while 60% of its population lived below the poverty line of PPP $2 per day. The former are what I call the perennial poor, probably unable to reach the critical minimum even in terms of nutrition, while the latter might have been able to reach the critical minimum in terms of food and clothing, plus some basic needs, but not appropriate shelter or adequate healthcare and education. The people between the two poverty lines, as many as 580 million people in South Asia, were the vulnerable poor, vulnerable to any shock such as a bad harvest, high inflation, jobs lost, an illness, or even a marriage in the family. But that is not all. Our social indicators of development on health and education status are still among the worst in the world, with the possible exception of some countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Clearly, we have miles to go in the journey if the destination is the well-being of our people. It is obvious that South Asia has much to learn from the rest of Asia about industrialization as an imperative, the critical importance of employment, a focus on human development, and the fundamental role of governments in transforming economies, which has been forgotten in this kind of article of faith in the magic of markets. Now, in this quest for development, there are many, many things that need to be done. Given the focus of this morning, let me simply highlight the importance of regional cooperation as a means in the sphere of economics and an end in the realm of politics. The logic and benefits of economic cooperation between South Asian countries are obvious enough, but I will explain further in a moment. To begin with, almost everyone thought of economic cooperation in terms of trade, and therefore the essential idea underlying SAARC and SAFTA was a free trade agreement among countries in South Asia. It is another matter that it did not materialize in any meaningful sense. The argument then was largely about trade in goods. The world has changed since then, as Ferdinand Bagley pointed out yesterday evening, significantly, there is so much more now in terms of economic transactions related to cross-border movements of services, of investment, of technology, and of people. There is, in addition, the wider political context and purpose in a subcontinent where harmony has proved elusive and contradiction and conflict tended to have surfaced time and again. There is something that we can learn from Europe as well, okay? Which is why I profoundly disagree with what Swarning Bagle said yesterday, that it is, in a sense, a reason for the end of the South Asian dream. And what we can learn is how to get away from political contradictions and conflicts embedded in history. It is worth remembering that 6 countries in Western Europe, including France and Germany, signed the Treaty of Rome in 1957, just 12 years after the end of World War II, to establish the European Economic Community, which evolved through successive stages of integration into the European Union as a single market. Now, Brexit is a setback, but in a sense, it's a self-inflicted wound, because the European Union, in my view, is above all a political project for peace and security in Europe, a continent that fought itself for 200 years, that it chose to move to the euro and a unified exchange rate, which was neither necessary nor sufficient for the Union, was a mistake. Okay? But the project for peace in Europe sustains. ASEAN, set up in 1967, has also made significant progress, at least in terms of arriving at near free trade, plus institutional frameworks for other cross-border economic transactions. Now, SAARC was established as late as 1985. It has been 3 decades since then, more than. Yet, the progress, even in terms of mildest forms of economic cooperation, has been at best modest. Trade in goods, let alone services, between South Asian countries, it has been said time and again, is a disproportionately small fraction of their total trade. Cross-border investments or movements of people are negligible. Of course, India and Nepal are, in terms of labor mobility, an economic union. Now, this near absence of economic engagement with each other provides a sharp contrast not only with Asia and the world, but also with South Asian countries themselves in their engagement with the world economy, or even with one large country, China. The constraints are embedded ultimately in politics, which has turned out to be a stumbling block. The present impasse, like many before, has pushed the official SAARC process into a meltdown once again. Now, in the time I have remaining, and I hope, Mr. Chairman, I will save you some time, which is scarce, there are 3 things I want to set up. First, the logic of regional cooperation. Second, the actors and the stage. And third, the next steps that I would contemplate for our elusive quest. If we think of the logic of regional cooperation, it has 2 dimensions, political and economic. Now, the political benefits of cooperation are obvious. The peace dividend or the reduction of conflict dividend will accrue at home, and resources so saved will benefit people at large. Second, it would provide South Asia as a region with a collective bargaining power vis-à-vis the outside world. That has been the logic too, please remember, of the European Union or of ASEAN or of Mercosur. Now, in the international, in the international context, this bargaining power will come from the size of the market, which is large in terms of the number of people, even if not in terms of their average income levels. but the potential is enormous as everybody, everywhere in the world, eyes South Asia as a market. Okay. Now, in the multilateral context, it might help South Asia exercise influence on rules and practices in multilateral institutions. In a bilateral context, I believe it could help South Asia enormously vis-à-vis China, which is seeking to influence each country separately and driving a separate but harder bargain. So South Asia as a region in which China too has a stake would better bargain. And three, connectivity across countries in South Asia, a political connectivity that is, will have major economic spin-offs. Now, if we look at the economic dimension, the logic is obvious. You know, we are a region of geographical proximity and economic complementarities, which was just 70 years ago a single market, although in a much less developed world. Now, it is this enormous potential that we could exploit, whether it's trade, investment, technology, or services. And these gains are not only static gains from trade, there are also dynamic gains from trade. So that while something is a function of gains from exchange, okay, other things are a function of the scale and the period of time over which this takes place. Okay. Second, if there is an intersection between international transactions and national connectivity, both of which can drive economic development in South Asia. For example, if we think of Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, and the northeast of India, there are enormous synergies. So it is not just about regional cooperation between countries, but it's also about regional cooperation within all these countries. Okay. Third, learning from each other. Best practices, appropriate technologies. We in South Asia, much derided by the rest of the world, do lead the world in some domains. It could be microcredit, it could be space, it could be information technology, and there are possibilities. And last but not least, this is about managing negative externalities that spill over across national borders and realizing positive externalities, so that spill over across borders. So if you think of negative externalities, it's about environmental degradation and climate change, which needs cooperation amongst us. And if you think of positive externalities that could be realized, it's about sharing river waters, it's about trading in power. So the logic is overwhelming. If we then look at the actors and the stage, there are three sets of actors. There are governments, there are markets, there are people. Governments, more often than not, are the stumbling blocks. Now, this is driven often by domestic political compulsions, sometimes perceived rather than real, as governments and political parties seek to mobilize support from the people. This could be driven by conflict and contradiction, where I said perceptions and realities differ, and they are often embedded in history. And these could be religious, ethnic, linguistic, different forms. But I think that such decisions are often driven by a short-term political calculus rather than long-term thinking in political processes. And it is possible that if political parties and governments in South Asia begin to think beyond the next month, the next year, or the next elections, they might think this logic more clearly. Now, last but not least, there is a real problem. Any form of economic cooperation between countries requires some ceding of national sovereignty. You need to cede sovereign economic and political space. And there is a huge reluctance in countries that are poor, that are insecure, to cede this space, because they see ceding such space as a source of loss of face and of economic loss. But it is, in the long term, about gain. If you look at markets, now, markets would always seek to exploit economic complementarities reinforced by geographical proximity. It is in the logic of markets. Now, whether corporates as producers or people as consumers, the presence of smuggling, or what Mr. Kamar described yesterday as illegal transaction in trade between India and Pakistan, is in a sense the tip of the iceberg. So when any Department of Customs seizes smuggled goods, they multiply that by 10 or 20 to get a benefit or to get an estimate of what is actually being smuggled. So trade between South Asian countries is much larger than it seems to be. Okay? Yet it is restrained by borders, barriers, and restrictions. Now, if we think of people, I said this yesterday evening too, that there are cultural similarities and linguistic intersections, plus a shared history among South Asian countries. You and I could be speaking the same language. The people in Bangladesh and what we call West Bengal could hardly speak the same language. There is a natural affinity amongst our peoples, cuisine, music, arts, crafts, values, cultures. And please note that there is much, much less diversity among people in South Asia than there is amongst people in Europe. Whatever dimension you see. Now, the irony of our lives is that we are so near and yet so far from each other. In sum, what I want to say is even if governments are unwilling or unable to foster regional economic cooperation, markets and people both want such cooperation. So if they are not restrained from doing so, they will find ways of doing it. And markets have the ability and the inclination to circumvent rules and regulations. And once economic benefits of such cooperation, however fragmented, become visible, governments might have no choice but to follow the path of markets and people. What I said, ultimately, that flag could follow trade in the idiom. Now, am I then an incurable romantic? Am I like Rahman Sobhan, my friend, with a beam in our eyes about South Asia as an economic union? Yes and no, but not quite. Governments might learn as time and circumstances change, but they will have to be induced and they will have to be prompted. But I do believe that without being an incurable romantic, a better world is possible in South Asia and for South Asia. In conclusion, next steps for our elusive quest. First, I cannot stress enough the importance of building blocks or baby steps. That's how human beings learn to walk. We need to strengthen sub-regional, sub-sub-regional economic cooperation in South Asia through emerging arrangements. It could be BBIN, BIMSTEC. You know, there's so many people here who know more about that than I do. And tangible and visible benefits, even in one dimension of these emerging arrangements, would have powerful demonstration effects. And it might lead, say, Pakistan to consider connectivity to West Asia, opening it up to the rest of South Asia, because governments are knowledge-proof, but even governments can learn. Second, there has to be an effort on the part of corporates to consider cross-border transactions and investments, recognizing the short-term costs, but banking on the long-term benefits. Now let me cite you a wonderful example that comes from my conversation with Keshav Mahindra, who is now, I think, about 93, but a very dynamic man. And long ago in Lahore, he founded a firm called Mustafa and Mahindra with his partner, Mustafa. But when after partition, they moved to Bombay, he sought to continue that collaboration with Mr. Mustafa, who was unable to, given the ravages of the partition. And then Mr. Mahindra decided to call it M&M, retaining implicitly the Mustafa in it. Now, many corporate leaders I talked to in India are tempted by markets in South Asia, by comparative advantage, by geographical proximity, but shy away because risks are too high, gestation lags are too long. But if, look at the number of Indian smaller businessmen doing garments exports from Bangladesh for a variety of reasons. All that is changing. Third, I think civil society, institutions, intellectuals, and citizens in our countries, people like us, must come together to preserve the spirit, I would say, not of South Asia, not of SAARC, but of South Asia, as an organization, and the idea of South Asia as a region. Now, the South Asia Economic Summit is an example, so is SASEPS, which I kind of have an institutional role in. Now, our object should be create a meeting space, and I have learned this, the importance of this from my friend Professor Sohan, something like Davos that facilitates interaction not only between parliamentarians, policymakers, the business community, media people, public intellectuals, civil society, but also with a wider constituency of people, concerned citizens committed to the promotion of regional cooperation in South Asia. Now, it might be appropriate, and I'm sorry, I would have taken up almost my entire quota, but I will finish before, to conclude with a game theory parable. Now, the desirability of cooperative solutions juxtaposed with the probability of prisoner's dilemma outcomes is my parable. Now, the choice between a situation where everybody is worse off and a situation where everybody is better off is obvious. Okay? Now, why do such cooperative solutions have to wait until the costs of non-cooperation cross thresholds of tolerance amongst people? Now, that is a driving mechanism for resistance of citizens to pollution and to environmental degradation. Do mindsets in governments change only if there are crises, such as famines or war, or can they come from an enlightened self-interest? Now, I am convinced that a better world is possible for South Asia. Now, if this does not materialize in the next decade, at the South Asia Economic Summit 10 years later, we might have to change the question in such a plenary session from whither SAARC to why did SAARC wither away? Thank you.
Thank you so much. You are on time. Excellent. So, Professor Nair has really covered a wide spectrum of the difficulties and possibilities in SAARC, intra-regional cooperation, integration. I think most of the issues that I'm going to propose to the speakers, who already are aware about their roles by now, have been widely covered. So this is excellent. Based on your statement, your observations, we can make a complimentary note on what we personally think, and then maybe raising a couple of answers that the issues that need further elaboration, So this is a good opportunity. So now, organizers are wondering if we could revolve around 4 important issues that have been already given to you all. So number 1 is really a SAARC is in coma. So it indicates there is still a hope. So they are not already a dead body. So but they have termed it as a comatose state. And then second interest for the organizers by the speakers would be on South Asian Economic Union. Professor Nair has highlighted on this issue as well. But forming customs union, as was dreamed earlier, is not that easy. It demands several issues such as harmonization of customs procedures and documentation, finalization of schedules of specific commitments under SATIS. Similarly, utilization of South Asia Development Fund, which is less than, the achievement is less than satisfactory. This was probably the reason during Finance Ministry of the SAARC, this issue had not been, the issue of establishing SAARC Development Bank had not been given too much of importance. Their focus was on materializing the wishes within the SAARC Development Fund. And then the third issue they have taken interest is about the need for SAARC charter and architecture in need of reforms. This was the issue that we seriously discussed during the 18th SAARC Summit, which was held in Kathmandu in 2014. I could see a couple of faces down there, our former Foreign Secretary Madhuji, Diliji, and then Dr. Jagdish Pokhrel. We were in the drafting committee, and then we raised this issue. Is it the high time for us to rethink about, reconsidering some amendments in the SAARC Charter? It was largely because of the strong feeling that Secretary do not have, full authority, full mandate to effectively implementing the decisions made by the members. So this is probably the reason there is a dearth of public accountability. If you ask general people on the street, they are not very much aware about the declarations we make during the summits, and they are least bothered about that either. So this is also perhaps the reason why SAARC has not been able to live up with the expectations of big promises. So this is the third issue. And the fourth issue is how far sub-regional initiatives should be taken. What is your personal thoughts on this? So we have a BBIN working well at the moment, so far I know, because I have been also involved in BBIN. The guys whom I see here from UNISCAP, Dr. Nagesh Kumar, from RIS, my colleague Sachin Chaturvedi, Professor Chaturvedi. We have collaboratively worked on this area, BBIN, BIMSTEC, etc. So it would be nice for every one of us to discuss a little bit about the efficacy of the emerging sort of interest in sub-regional groupings. So these are the core areas. So each one of you has been given 6 minutes. Hope you comply with the conditionality, not to commit the same mistake that we did last time, yesterday. So the first person now would be, as to the schedule, Honorable Rana Muhammad Afzal Khan. Mr. Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission on the introduction, I would just like to add that I am a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Assembly of Pakistan and also a member of the Parliamentary Committee on CPAC. Just added if there are questions on these two areas. And Professor Nayer's keynote speech was a wonderful discourse on where we stand today, and very impressive, very nice. But the topic for today, given to me, WHITHER SAARC, is accepting defeat, and we should not. I will start by saying that in 1947, India was united, and today we are 3 countries. These 3 countries could have started SAARC, but the bitterness of divide took us so long that it had to be 7 countries to join together to form SAARC. And if India was united, would we wither any part of India? Why would we wither SAARC? It is not accepting the challenges that a united India or a united region needs to be tackled. And more than challenges, it is the opportunities in Pakistan today the connectivity has united us more than anything else. The first motorway that we started from Peshawar to Karachi is still in the way, but unimaginable integration has occurred. And today with CPAC coming, Pakistan is going to be connected with the rest of the world, and we could not imagine what it would bring to us. But the opportunity of not only CPAC route will connect those areas of Pakistan and bring them to the main economic frontiers of Pakistan, it also provides us a road not from China to Pakistan or to the rest of the world, but from Pakistan to the biggest economy in the world. So connectivity has to be seen as a huge opportunity, and South Asia suffers from connectivity. The bitterness of divide of the Indian subcontinent lingers on, and I think that is where we have to overcome this bitterness and see the future ahead of us. Have we accepted the subdivide? If we have, then we should be able to cooperate, then we should be able to change, we should be able to disagree and continue. So this is a challenge, and we have to learn to be partners in progress. The challenges, as explained by Professor Nair, are enormous. Climate change. Pakistan suffered a few years ago from dengue, a mosquito-driven disease. And when it occurred, all of a sudden, after 65 years of our history, we have never had it. And then we had to rush to Sri Lanka, we had to rush to Thailand, we had to rush to certain other countries to learn. We sent 1,000 people to learn how to control a mosquito across the borders. And so many hundreds of people died. Today, smog. Yesterday also somebody mentioned. We never had it in Pakistan. This year, people are scared. People are so fearful. What will happen to us? So these are so many opportunities that we fail to recognize within our borders and within our region. Why are so many international observers, international countries want to become observers in SAARC? As Professor Nair explained, the big market, the potential that we do not see but they see. And every country, from even Russia, wants to become an observer in SAARC. So I think it is this potential that we have to see, which will not allow us to wither SAARC. I have a list of areas which have already been discussed by Professor Nair. It is the mistrust and the distrust. Pakistan and India probably are more responsible to make SAARC work better. And if dialogue can be resumed, if we can discuss and we can agree to disagree and proceed, I think we have a tremendous future. While Pakistan wishes every member of SAARC every possible success, we in Pakistan cannot accept atrocities to any communities anywhere in the world. We in Pakistan would want the agreements to be implemented. We feel it is our right. We would want the basics to be solved. And unless those basics are solved, these are the impediments that we see hurt our bilateral relations, hurt the progress of SAARC, and this is true for all countries of the world. With CPAC coming, we offer connectivity to any country in the world. All US is participating, Arab countries are participating, Turkey is participating. Iran is connecting Chabahar to Gwadar. There is a plan to do that. And we offer that to India and to the rest of SAARC. Let us share the infrastructure available in all our countries with each other, the combined market. Only tourism can change our destiny. Over 1 billion affording Chinese if they start visiting our countries. Only one nation, just across the borders from us. We will be inundated with tourists, and imagine the trickle-down effect to the poorest of the poor in this region. So I think WHITHER SAARC is not an option. The option is to forget any bitterness, to look at the combined market, to see how all those countries who want to become observers in SAARC see SAARC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, good to hear optimistic perspective to continue the spirit of SAARC with regards to your top priority areas that have some level of commonality and interest. So now the second speaker is Ambassador Dinesh Bhattacharya. Ambassador
Thank you, Chair. I feel it a great pleasure and privilege to be among the distinguished gathering here. I thank the organizer for giving me this opportunity also. As we meet here to identify challenges and prioritize opportunities in deepening regional economic integration in South Asia, I am reminded of the 14th SAARC summit that was held in Nepal in 2014 with the theme Deeper Integration for Peace and Prosperity. I think this summit underlines the pressing urgency for more connectivity, for deeper integration among the South Asian countries. As Professor Nair in his keynote address said, we are so near and far from each other. I think that sums up, that gives a picture in South Asia. And we also heard Mr. Khan, so I will not be going into all these details. What attracts observers to South Asia is, of course, its market, big market. Also, because South Asia has a unique geographical, geopolitical realities. The dispersal of the geopolitical power has put South Asia on a tight spot, I would say. We need to understand and come clear on what is happening here, who is doing what to whom, and how and why. South Asia, I think, has been thrown based on its complexities and failed to harness potentials for promoting regional economic relations. The SAARC economic roadmap has been too slow and painful. A doable and implementable roadmap is possible and is needed. SAARC has adopted several measures for integration. Among them, the first is like SAFTA, and then we have sub-regional cooperation which could not take up, and then we have people-to-people contacts, and of course we talk about tourism, and we also talk of several other measures, and this is all we talk, we take decisions, but implementation side is poor. What is hindering our progress? The progress is hindered by reasons which are obvious. Among them is, I would list number one as terrorism. South Asia has been the worst victim of terrorism, and this terrorism has delayed SAARC summits and also hurt bilateral relations. I remember in 1987 in third SAARC summit in Kathmandu, it established, we adopted the regional convention of. And after 9/11 attack, an additional protocol that came against the backdrop of 9/11 was adopted to meet the obligation of the United Nations Security Council 1373. So, taking all these things together, if we do not rise up, if we do not realize, if we are not honest to each other, and if we do not come clear, then South Asia, we fear, may turn into a, because of its geopolitics, may turn into a playground. Instability is its greatest enemy. Its vulnerability and instability could infect neighbors, generating wider instability. So this, as far as terrorism is concerned, there should be no second thought. Terrorism undermines the culture of peace, and terrorism is no excuse to the totality of the relations among nations in South Asia. And now time has come to be honest, as I said, to ourselves and make candid assessment and admission of the reality. In the connectivity, we have adopted several measures in 18th summit in Kathmandu. We agreed on energy framework cooperation, and we were to take up SAARC motor vehicle agreement, rail agreement, regional air services agreement, and the other. Just 1 minute. And migration was mainstream, so I will consult on this. So, in 3 decades, SAARC has done 2 months and too little. 2 months in nurturing apprehension and too little in opening minds to each other. Actions are needed to translate the principles, objectives, and decisions into concrete actions. SAARC is our hope and future also. So you asked whether SAARC is in coma. I would say SAARC is sidelined, and we need SAARC. SAARC needs strong and effective intellectual institutions and structure to develop and deliver regional diplomacy and resources for building regional capacity and to promote and protect integrated process through SAARC. There is a window available in SAARC. The retreat provides leaders unique opportunities to work for breakthrough on sensitive issues confronting the region. The region has to work to overcome old mindsets which are crippling effect on the organization's capacity. SAARC can be a vital instrument of regional peace, development and stability, and also at the core and hub of Asian solidarity. SAARC countries as a group can offer more than they do individually. They can form common position on common issues. So, and present themselves as an effective forum. So to conclude, because the time limit, SAARC as a future, we need SAARC, and SAARC is a hope. There is so much of potential, there are so many complementarities, and unless we stand together, unless we come together and work together, I do not think in this interdependent and interconnected world we can achieve or we can address the challenges that are confronting the humanity. For now, I will stop and I will come back later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Really good. I presume there is inverse relationship between the time allocated and your experience. This cannot match. 6 minutes reflecting your entire experiences with the SAARC and other UN agencies. But I expect that you will be providing, sharing information that you have on discussed, on resolved issues that you have noted down to the organization for the next year's proceedings. We may be luckiest person to launch another proceedings in the next summit, next year. So with these words, I would ask my friend from Afghanistan, Mr. Najib Kabir.
Thank you, Excellency, for the kind introduction and for the nice words. It's a pleasure being here amongst you, and I'm very humbled being in this panel with a group of distinguished scholars prominent and distinguished scholars, whom I'm very proud of to have in this region and represent Afghanistan. Your Excellency, Dr. Mayar, you did a wonderful job setting the floor for the rest of us to speak about the challenges the region is faced with. Yesterday, I believe the panels, the plenary did a wonderful job of discussing the nature of the challenges, the one part of the issue, the technicality of it, and this morning, Nayar Saab, you try to illustrate a picture of a situation where regional cooperation could be a win-win situation for all of us. What I'm trying to get into is perhaps the why part, and that has to do with why not cooperation. What's the philosophy, what's the reason behind the lack of cooperation? There were some references to the political issues in the region. My distinguished colleague from Nepal referred to the fact that we have to be honest and the issues involving terrorism and bad politics, perhaps. And then I will be sharing the experience of Afghanistan as a country in between the two sub-regions, South Asia and Central Asia, as a land bridge, perhaps connecting, having the opportunity to equally connecting Central Asia to South Asia, Central Asia rich of resources, and South Asia in need of the potential resources in the future. So we are dealing with two identities in the region. The post-Soviet type of identity, nation-building institutions in Central Asia, the dictatorship, and the post-colonial situation and proving of identity in the South Asia part of the subcontinent. It took Central Asia less than 10 years to integrate again, after proving their identities as Uzbeks, Turkmens, Tajiks, and Afghans, or the rest. But it takes South Asia 70 years, and still we are struggling with the fact that we are Indians and Pakistanis and Afghans. This is unacceptable. 70 years of lack of cooperation, and the cost of cooperation, Dr. Sam, you referred to, is tremendous. We all understand the benefits of regional cooperation. It's not rocket science. We know the benefits of trade and transit and cooperation and the greater impact it might have on the growth and poverty reduction. But the fact is that why is that it doesn't happen? And then we kind of talk about politics. Historically, it was India and Pakistan, and now it's Afghanistan, again involving Pakistan and a series of unfortunate situations. So with this, I want to make a quick disclaimer, because here we have His Excellency Khan Saab, a dear friend of mine, whom I spoke with in Urdu yesterday, and I also appreciate the fact that he is traveling with his wife from Pakistan. I noticed that this summit has been a little gender imbalance. The plenaries yesterday and the talk this morning, I hope that maybe during the discussions later, we have some women participation in the roundtables. My quick disclaimer, Your Excellency, Ambassador Saab, I hope I'm not running out of the time, is that I distinguish between the state in Pakistan, which is the civilian government of the People's Party of Pakistan and the Muslim League, the political parties, and I also differentiate between the militarized state, which is within the state, owns the state perhaps by most definitions, and the intelligence agency, which is predominantly known, famously known as the RSI, and also the people of Pakistan. So with this disclaimer, I'm not trying to be confrontational in any means. With His Excellency and my colleagues from Pakistan who are representing the people of Pakistan, the youth of Pakistan, the 190 million people who are suffering, living in Pakistan, and are being taken hostage ever since Pakistan was being liberated from, or divided from India. And this is the why part, that why it doesn't happen. Why it doesn't happen is because not Pakistan as a state, but the military agency, the intelligence who are owning the system, the foreign policy, are in the business of not regional cooperation, but in the business of creating fear, importing fear in the first place to make their own people afraid of an evil called India, an evil called Afghanistan, and then exaggerating fear and exporting fear. It's not that Pakistanis don't understand the business of the philosophy of trade, that we are trying to teach them some lessons of cooperation with India or Afghanistan, the rest of Asia. The simple philosophy. Somebody referred about the Grand Trunk Road. An Afghan emperor, a Pashtun emperor of Delhi, in the 16th century, connected Kabul all the way to Kolkata. It's not about the fact that we don't know the know-how and knowledge and technology and the benefits of economics. You are a scholar of economics or the rest. So with this, we feel that we as a country in South Central Asia, our experiences as well. And that experience is extremely costly as a result of loss of lives and treasure and waste of an opportunity provided to us by the international community with billions of dollars and treasure and hundreds of lives and thousands of lives on yearly basis of international troops and ourselves. So the conclusion we have come to is that it's a country, a state without the nation, maybe. It's a country owned by the military. It's an industry which provides fear and terror and exports it continuously, keeps two enemies but one friend, which is China. And the philosophy, the one part is to keep itself legitimate. If there's fear of India, if there's fear of Afghanistan, so you get into the business of making yourself legitimate and relevant to continue ruling this country. They just ousted the Prime Minister, an elected Prime Minister, who believed in regional cooperation, who came with the motto of energy connectivity and bilateral cooperation with India and Afghanistan and Central Asia. So this is the fact that we are dealing with. This is the big elephant in the room. It's not a technical know-how of economics or the peace dividend or the so forth and so on. So this is at the heart of it, that the region is lagging behind as a matter of, as a result of this unfortunate situation. And we as a member of the SAARC family have a responsibility to address this collectively in front of the international community and get ourselves out of this hostage crisis and get the people of Pakistan out of this hostage crisis. So, if I may, for a few seconds, refer to the SAARC situation, I believe SAARC as an institution is partially successful, provided we have other political challenges. Politics is not bad. I think all around the world we have politics and politicians. Militarized politics, militarized foreign policy is what the issue is. So I believe we have to narrow down the definition of the different complications with respect to the politics. And finally, there are two changes with respect to the situation in the region. Nobody referred to. Number one, SAARC was abandoned in Pakistan by 4 nation states. That makes more than half of the population of the region. Almost 90% of the people in the region say no to SAARC Islam. This is a change of regional narrative. The second change is the change of the international narrative with respect to dealing with this terrorism. The state-sponsored terrorism that makes the people of Pakistan suffer, makes the people of India and the people of Afghanistan suffer. suffer, and as a result, the entire region suffer. The change of narrative is United States strategy for South Asia. It doesn't talk about economics or economic cooperation. It talks about fighting terrorism. Pakistan is labeled as a safe haven for terrorism by the international community. This is very important. It's extremely unfortunate. As a country, our neighbor, our SAARC member family is suffering from terrorism. It's affected by this terrorism that is taking life of its own people in a wider region, and it is also, exporting this agenda. So our option perhaps is the same way as other countries are looking east to west, north, south. We are also not, as a younger member of the SAARC state, not waiting perhaps for the SAARC, for the South Asia to pick up. We have no options. We are working with Central Asia. Chabahar is functional. The first shipment was already arrived. So we are not waiting for the conventional 70+ years of strategic patience. This is not strategic patience. This is strategic failure. And I thank you. And there was something I want you to display on the screen, and I leave you with that, connecting you, Your Excellency, to the heritage. And I also spoke yesterday as a Farsi. I will do the translation, but I will read the Farsi part, which is a common culture heritage of the region from the time of the Sadi, a Persian poet of the medieval times. And this is the motto at the gate of the UN in New York, which says, که در آفرینش به یک جوهر چو عضو بدن دارد روزگار دگر عضوها را نماند قرار تو از مهنت دیگران بیغمی نشاید که نامت نهد آدمی. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kabiri. You are not only advising in financial issues, you are advising in development policy as well. So, yes. No, thanks. Now we have Suresh.
I come from business, so I'm not a diplomat. Neither am I from the government services, nor do I come from a conflict that we had in South Asia. So what I say may shock you, surprise you, but I go back with a very realistic approach, because in business we make a 5-year business plan before we invest in anything. And it's the numbers that show what realities are. After 30 years, here we are, sitting down, intellectual people, people with knowledge, people who've been responsible for South Asia, discussing whether we should go ahead with South. Sad, pathetic, upsetting. 18 summits have taken place in South Asia. Our leaders have promised economic prosperity. The problem with us is we promise too much. Our leaders promise too much, so the expectation is extremely high, while we know that these promises can never be delivered. And that's where the problem starts. Our forefathers who started SAARC had a different vision for South Asia, a peaceful South Asia, an economic bloc that would move forward. Sad. But let me tell you, there are two countries that don't even recognize each other, China and Taiwan. China does not recognize Taiwan, and nor does Taiwan say. They have about 108 flights a week between China and Taiwan. If it works there, why don't countries that have accepted 30 years ago that we will work together are talking about whether we need to exist? It's kind of upsetting, because in business we make plans. When we hear of governments saying, now we move forward on energy, we move on transit, we start talking, we start spending money doing researches, putting our investment into it by saying we need to work on it. I came back from China last night just to attend this program, because we have a China-South Asia Investment Forum taking place in China as I speak. And I left that group with there's about 80 people up there from all countries of South Asia, talking about how we need to regionally grow and prosper. I'd just like to put SAARC talks about a lot of things, a lot of good things, but it is about the people. We've heard terrorism. Tell me, here in this room, how many of us have been denied visa to travel to each other's country? Movement of people is almost impossible. In Sri Lanka, the immigration officers and the ministers met, and I was given time to make a presentation. My question was simple. 0.001% of South Asia's 1.4 billion people are good people. We're not terrorists. But if you don't let us move, if you don't let us help invest in each other's country, if you don't let us understand each other's culture, we will encourage more terrorism. Are we saying then that 0.001% of the population that terrorizes people hold 99.99% of the people from moving forward? Shame on us. Shame on us. Shame on us. If this is what we think that we need to move forward, it's sad. We're talking about climate change. The haze, the pollution, the rivers, the countries warming up have effect on each and every one of us in one way or the other. Climate does not have borders. They go beyond borders. And yet we can't talk about things that's more relevant to us. And we talk about the 0.001% of the people that stop us from moving forward. We don't talk about increasing our trade and investment in the region because we talk about that 0.1001% of the terrorists that control us. Where are we headed? All I say at this stage is SAARC Chamber is 25 years old, will be 25 years old in December. We believe South Asia has a future. We believe the only way to move forward is economic integration between us. It is not trade. SAPTA was probably the wrong move, because the problem is many of the smaller countries have very little to trade with. We need to invest first. We need to bring investment into our countries. The problem that South Asia faces in all 8 countries is our young people are moving away because they don't get jobs in our countries. It is true with Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Bhutan now. Young people don't get jobs in their homes. They've stopped believing in their own countries, so forget the region. Our priority should be investment, bringing investment to each other. And therefore, all I say is, I think there's tremendous potential. What SAARC Chamber is looking at is not the big picture of getting South Asia moving forward together, is to get the women together. We've got amazing women who think differently from the way we think. Move the agenda forward. They're talking about small and medium handicraft industries. Talk about the youth who think differently from a lot of us here. Unfortunately, I find very little youth and women in this room who matter, whose voices are still not heard, who would think differently from whether we exist. Probably they'll be speaking of why we need to work together and move forward together. The last 2 points, all I say, is important. The reason SAARC doesn't work is because the SAARC chapter says we need to agree on unanimous decision. Me and my brother, we don't agree on many issues in our business philosophy. Am I to say that if my brother doesn't agree with me, we just don't move forward? It doesn't make sense. Unanimous does not work. It is a lack of confidence in each other, and that is what holds SAARC back. Second, the SAARC Secretariat itself. With all due respect to the people there, and I admire the amount of work and time that you give, it's not strong enough. It is not a group of secretaries in our CEO company. It is secretary that leads what we decide amongst ourselves. EU, ASEAN succeeds because they've got past prime ministers and ministers heading those institutions. I'm not saying we're the wrong people, but they don't have enough power to be able to execute what they need to do. The last point here, SAARC is not India and Pakistan. It is not India and Pakistan. If it is, then the other 6 countries need to move out of SAARC and form their own little grouping. And I think it's time. It's actually time, ladies and gentlemen, for that 6 countries to sit down together and decide what do we expect from the regional growth. Do we have a common vision for a regional growth? Keep India and Pakistan out for a minute. Do we, 6 countries, have a vision? And that's going to move forward. Thank you.
So now we need to combine SAARC 2 and SAARC 6. So, as long as we argue, there is always a hope that tomorrow will be much better. When I was a grad student, almost 37, 38 years ago in the United States, my American friends used to tell me, there is tomorrow. Always hope for the best, you know. So we should be helpful in revitalizing the SAARC. But sorry to stop you, because you touched upon unexplained sensitivity of the SAARC as a whole. So it is always enjoyable to listen to you. So as committee people, we don't have much time. Only 20 minutes left for the floor discussion. And then maybe 2 minutes each for the keynote speaker and panelists to respond to the floor. And I may have only 1 or 2 minutes left. So I cut down my allocation 5 minutes to 3 or 2. Now the floor is open. You please, when you speak, you please identify yourself, your affiliation as well, name and affiliation.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to commend, compliment, and congratulate Mr. Surat Vaidya.
Only 1.5 minutes.
Who makes money, who is a man of making money, and we spoke very straightforward rather than speaking in political and diplomatic language. Because the beautiful reality of such symposiums and seminars is that we talk almost about everything under the moon, and we touch upon several things, and that gets us lost. Sometimes while being fascinated by the wilderness of the forest, you do not count the broken trees. So what are the things that need to be fixed? We heard a lot about rhetorics that led us to going to a sort of wishful thinking. We know SAARC is needed. We know the importance of regional economic integration. What are those 3 concrete steps, if I may, that come in your mind that will help us going toward deepening the economic integration in the region? Thank you.
This is Professor Mukherjee, former professor of JNU. I very much impressed by Vishambarji's expectation that there would be a comma, and Professor Iyer mentioned about a full stop possibility as well. I would say that it is between the two, a semicolon is there. And SAARC will continue merrily, not merrily, but it will learn from its drawbacks. Professor Nair, I would like to enlighten you that trade in SAARC came much later. It started with very non-controversial areas, and there was criticism that SAARC was not, core areas were not being taken up. But it came up in the 90s, the work done by RIS to enable the SAFTA to come about. But SAFTA did not work its way through. I mean, it did not go far enough. It was too cautious. And what I would like to say that we have a lot to learn from East Asian countries, no doubt, as Deepakji has mentioned. But there are some things we should say, we should not unlearn, because the initial conditions are different. The East Asian countries developed when there was a very buoyant external market growth, when climate was not an issue. Now, these are the issues. Initial conditions are different in South Asia. So the challenges are higher. I remember in my school days, cooperative movement in India had failed, and the expert on the committee on that mentioned, cooperation in India has failed. but cooperation must succeed. So there is no other way but to succeed. And learning from the, I would say, since I would not take much time, I would say that whatever initiatives have been taken between India and Bangladesh, particularly the border trade, arts and bazaars, and then coastal shipping, and then constant consultation. These are the things that I think should be replicated all over other countries. I think I will not say much because there will be others speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mukherjee. Yeah.
My name is Zubair Faisal Abbasi, and I work with Impact Consulting, and we are into economic research on trade and industry, and as well as we are practitioners of international trade, we import and export. So, what intrigues me is that the CPEC or OBOR is much larger than connectivity. It is actually a cross-border investment. And my understanding is that SAARC should seriously look into this thing. And why I'm saying this, that China-led or China-dominated, whatever you want to call it, China-led, China-dominated connectivity, it does pose challenges as well as opportunities. Challenges are actually the way Chinese do business. And the opportunities are that you can definitely get investment, as Mr. Suraj told us very succinctly, that we need deeper integration. We do not need only shallow integration where you only lower tariffs and you go for trade. We definitely need cross-border investments. We need institutional arrangements for conflict management related to businesses. We need physical infrastructure development in our home country so that connectivity is actually made possible. And perhaps we, as my friend from Afghanistan spoke about this thing, that we really need to address security issues in a very purposeful and meaningful way. This is where we really need confidence building measures. We really seriously need, and perhaps this cross-border investment, deeper integration is the bandwagon on which we can actually jump onto. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for this panel discussion.
Thank you so much. Is there any more comment?
Thank you. I am Dr. Arun Thakur. I am from Seda, Trivandrum University. I am Executive Director of Library Seda. I want to ask one question. We always think about what are the problems surrounding the SAARC, right? And why you are not going forward, right? This is the true picture. But I think, what are the corrective actions needed? We don't think. Means, as a state of management, I think that not only a statistics is important, only causal, that is the diagnosis is already made. But what are the problems to take the corrective actions? I think there is a problem of mentality. I think in the South Asia, we find generally that people have, or leaders have, those sometimes intellectual leaders are required, sometimes political leaders are required. But there is I think there is a lacking of the cooperation between the intellectuals and the politicians. That this is the major cause. And the people, those who are involved in the politics, that they are more egoist, I find. They are taking the conservative style of the leadership. I think that is the main hurdle. India and Pakistan have ego. Right? Sometimes Nepal and India also have some ego. Right? But ego fight is not a solution. So that I think that just we have to just remove our ego by taking that very part that is the important is to what extent we are responsible towards the people. their development, their need, right? So that if you come at the point that we have to serve the people, we have to integrate the people, Greater India, Mahabharata, Bharate, Khande, broader India, whatever it is. These regions are actually, that is the high part, middle part, and the lower part, coastal areas. Right, then how integrate each other, what are their needs, they are to be first assessed, and on the basis of their need, if we just try to solve the problem according to the need of the people, and if we just come together towards that, and if we want to respond toward the people of all the nations, then certainly it will be solved. I think so. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My name is Rahman Basnet. I am General Secretary for South Asian Trade Union Council, which works for 8 countries, the workers' organization. I would like to say only one problem.
Can you speak a little louder? We cannot hear you.
My name is Rahman Basnet. I work for South Asian Regional Trade Union Council, and I am General Secretary for 8 countries. The real problem with the SAARC is we are not open-hearted, we are full of hypocrisies. Either you bring bilateral agreement, bilateral agendas into the SAARC and resolve it, or don't let the bilateral agendas hold the SAARC. And the second thing I would like to say is for 30 years, SAARC been talking without the people, but it should be people-centric. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Salim.
Thank you. I am Anita Shrestha. I am working in the Himawanti, Nepal, which is supporting the women of the grassroots level. And I am surprised to see here that in the grassroots level I found many women in participation and even coming in the committee. But in here, from yesterday, I saw that there was not any woman in the panel discussion. And even today, I hope that there would be women in the panel discussion. But I am so sad that I could not see any women in panel. So that I want to ask question to the organizer: why you don't put women in this panel discussion? Thank you. This is my question.
Namaste. I'm Kartika Yadav, and I work as a planning officer at the National Planning Commission. So forgive me, my question is a bit redundant, and you've already answered this. But I'd just like to mention that regional cooperation arrangements are not only driven by economic factors, but like you mentioned, it's also driven by power and political factors and relations among member states. And like you said, SAARC has not been able to perform at par if we compare it with other regional organizations like COMESA or even the African Union. I believe that diversity in the region has become a matter of adversity rather than unity. So my question would be, is it possible to work towards economic progressiveness and regional integration whilst we are working for our own personal development as a state? Or is balance of power quintessential and should be a given if we have to attain integration? Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the last question from the floor. Professor Salim Rehan.
Thank you, sir. This is Salim Rehan, I'm Professor of Economics in Dhaka University, Executive Director, SANEM. I just like to put this issue in a bit of a different way. What I thought that probably rather than blaming each other, we should actually look at ourselves. Each country should look at its own domestic development strategy. Because what I think that what is really determining the regional integration process in South Asia is actually lack of the kind of convergence of domestic development economic strategy of the 8 South Asian countries. The way the Southeast Asian countries they did, and then aligned with the China's development strategies. So So that really helped the integration process. So in South Asia, what we are seeing at this moment is mostly India and Bangladesh. We can see a bit of convergence, and the recent integration process these two countries are having is just because of the convergence of these two countries, their nature of their growth, the kind of export-led and the kind of manufacturing, but other countries are not really able to pick it up. Bhutan is kind of, I would say, is kind of trying to get its competitive advantage in producing electricity, hydroelectricity. Probably that could really help Bhutan to integrate. Nepal is really way far. Sri Lanka probably in between, but unfortunately Pakistan is way far. So I think we should really concentrate on our development strategy, own development strategy, and whether we can converge to a South Asian growth model. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Salim. Now we have 5 individuals, excluding myself. So 2 minutes each, that means 10 minutes we have to wind this up, and then I will take 2 to 3 minutes. So beginning from extreme left.
So thank you very much. I did not exceed my time in the beginning, but my colleague from Afghanistan doubled it, so give me a few more minutes. First of all, I think I'll speak on SAARC and then on Afghanistan. On SAARC, the question is, in the community of nations, do we sit as equals? This is the question that hampers SAARC. Pakistan as a nation, on any international forum, would want to sit as equals with any other country. Be those countries weaker than us or stronger than us in their own domain. In international fora, we are equal. That is the respect we give to every country, and that is the respect we expect from any country. So this is the base on which Afghanistan is our neighbor. My colleague here today from Afghanistan, we were together in Dhaka as well. And I would like to tell him that in the last 13 months, what has Pakistan achieved? We have waged the biggest war on terror. After having suffered 70,000 casualties in Pakistan like no other country, we waged this war on terror, costing us billions of dollars, and we have wiped it out. We used to have 2,500 to 2,700 bombings a year that translate into 8 or 10 bombings per day. It is history. I don't remember when was the last bombing, maybe 2 months ago. We still have them on a smaller scale. But the terrorism fight, that terrorism we have given to terrorism, I wish other countries do the same. My colleague here from Afghanistan speaks a different language. His president speaks a different language. The biggest red carpet they have, they laid that carpet for our army chief when he recently visited. And the statements and speeches he made in praise of Pakistan Army, helping Afghanistan and our ISI helping Afghanistan and sharing intelligence is totally different from what my colleague from Afghanistan had to say here today. We host thousands of their students, we give them scholarships, we give them every facility. Transit is their right, and we provide it with every discretion, that as if it is our own part of the country. But I mean, you don't speak other people's language. Afghanistan has to unite inside. 40% of Afghanistan is controlled by the present government. Where is the rest of the 60%? They are not Afghans. It is your internal matter. I don't have to speak on that. But unless all these countries have internal unity, you cannot contribute to the unity of SAARC. So also, as I mentioned in the 6 minutes I had, there is bitterness of divide. There has been bitterness between India and Pakistan. Our security was threatened from day one, and that resulted in 4 military coups. And that is history again. Political government to political government transition has taken place. Another transition is expected in months. So democracy has taken roots in Pakistan. We believe in democratic setup. We want to be friends with all countries, and we want to share our resources. So I think you have to see Pakistan as it is emerging, as a responsible state. We contribute the biggest number of peacekeepers to the United Nations and in peacekeeping all over the world. So you have to visit Pakistan. Please visit Pakistan to see the changed Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You have been a very strict headmaster, sir. I think the key to regional integration, key to deepening integration is the improvement of political understanding. Without that, it will be difficult to proceed. Second is, if there is a political understanding, SAARC could be a vehicle of vision and voice of reason. Third is unity in diversity is South Asia's strength. Social harmony and tolerance have been our concern. It was encouraging, it is encouraging in fact, to see that South Asia has become more democratized. And it is only in democracy that diverse societies come together and work together. So, democracy is an absolutely, I feel, necessary condition for South Asian nation to remain united. And democracy is indispensable for development. And we believe that it is only in democracy that growth becomes inclusive, sustainable, and equitable. So, and democracy also will bring people together and will work in building the mutual trust. And if we have mutual trust, I think we'll move forward towards integration. Thank you.
Just 3 bullets. First, if SAARC has not worked for more than 30 years, it does not mean that we should dispense with it. We need to make it work better. However, I do want to stress that SAARC is a means. It's not an end. And therefore, if we have to think out of the box, if we have to reinvent SAARC, we must do so without hesitation. Second, and I echo what has been said by Salim Rehan, what's been said by Mr. Patala, that if countries in South Asia evolve national development strategies that improve the well-being of their people, and if political systems become more meaningful and less ritual as democracies, both these things will be conducive to and supportive of the possibilities of cooperation among South Asian countries. Third, I think the best should not be the enemy of the good. We should strive to do anything and everything we can, however little. And I agree with Mr. Vaidya, if there is on the part of business in South Asian countries a desire to invest, we should help rather than hinder the process. And last, if only we could allow easier, if not completely free movement of people across our borders, it will go a long way. But it seems to me, if I look at the reality around us, that it is the least probable of the things I have mentioned, because governments are obsessed with security, and consular restrictions for the movement of people within South Asia are still incredibly high, even when you compare it with industrial societies. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, for the floor again. Asian culture of acceptance and patience. But foreign politics is based on reality. And this has been the unfortunate case in this region. I myself, being a development practitioner, involved in Afghanistan for the last 17 years, Afghanistan a laboratory for all different practices, 45 plus generous countries from all around the world brought land and treasure to change the course of destiny for my country. Never ever such an example of cooperation of civilization anywhere in the world, but still being violated and exhausted. So my disclaimer, of course, was that I distinguished between the state in Pakistan, which is a civilian state where we have a great amount of respect to, and also the people of Pakistan as our hosts, who hosted us during the war with Soviet. And of course, I also distinguish between the military establishment, which is the real subject to confrontation and argument and debate. With this, I continue respecting the Assembly, His Excellency Khan Sahab, and the people of the region, including the people of Pakistan, who deserve to have economics, connectivity, development. Into the question of cooperation, perhaps I would say India makes the largest export market for our products historically throughout the centuries, but at the moment we are being denied the land route to connect to Amritsar Authority. Our export is being denied by our brother, the militarized state, perhaps, not Pakistan. And as a result, we have to go around it and use a different route of the air corridor. So it's stopping your country, your neighbors' bilateral trade. It's stopping a trilateral trade in 21st century is an act of terror. Trade brings prosperity. Trade gets people out of poverty. Otherwise, people die. Stopping your neighbors' trade in 21st century in transit is an act of terror. So, with respect to the policy advice, Your Excellency Nayar Sahab, you spoke of the peace dividend. For the last 17 years of this experience, we have been trying to do bilateral cooperation with our neighbor Pakistan, predominantly for the fact of for this argument of peace dividend. We believe that connectivity, we believe that tactics, we believe that CASA 1000, the electricity project from South Asia, can perhaps give us some leverage, and interdependency can bring dependency, and dependency could result in greater and sustainable peace. I'm making all these arguments at the backdrop of all these practices being failed. With the help of this international community and our friends, the knowledge, the data, the intelligence, the evidence that we have is that the sanctuaries are being provided, terrorists are being trained, they're indoctrinated, they're provided with the vision, they're provided with the strategic guidance, not by the people, not by the government, but by the military agency, and particularly by this side. And it takes a lot of courage to speak against it. And you should also perhaps have the courage to speak up 70 years of strategic patience for the region in strategic failure. And I repeat.
That was a bit heavy for me. Yes, I come from business. I think South Asia, we look at ourselves too heavily, too strongly. Most of your parents, grandparents up here, and when our children come back from school from the exam, they normally get 75% or 80%. What do we tell them? That wasn't good enough. You should have got 90%. And if they get 90, then we say they should get 95%. That's South Asia, all right? And I think this is why we need to be a little lighter on ourselves. There's a lot of things we've achieved. There's a lot of good things we've done in the last 30 years. But I think it's all about the mindset. And let me tell you what SAARC Chamber is trying to do, all right? Women represent probably 50% of the entire population. And I'm not saying this again because it's a women issue. But we think differently in SAARC Chamber. We don't talk about empowering women. We talk about women empowering South Asia. That's mindset change. You don't want to empower them. They're empowered. Your house is probably controlled by them. You don't want to admit it. That's true. So I think we need to be open about it and change the way we look at issues and bring them up. The youth, which is really what South Asia has in its future. If South Asia has anything right that's happening at the moment, it's the youth. It's the youth that will break the barriers for us. It's the youth we need to invest in. It's the youth we need to talk to and listen to them. If you're talking about the future, let's not discuss here. This is the wrong forum. Let's bring the youth, talk to them and say, what is the future that they want? Because that youth does not talk about war. That youth talks about prosperity. And that's the kind of people that we need to bring into a forum. And that's what SAARC Chamber is working with. Let me also say that bringing people together is critically important. In December, we'll be working with the World Bank on a very small project. We've been talking about this for a long time. Moving people in South Asia is really difficult. But probably what we felt is Buddhism is something that touches almost all of us, starting from Afghanistan to Pakistan to India. All of us, it touches all of us one way or the other. So we're trying to see how we can bring a Buddhist circuit in this area. Something positive, something doable. It talks about peace. It talks about all the wonderful cultures we have amongst each other, and we share them. And probably also what we're talking about is creating business. Look, I mean, the thing is, governments aren't going to create business for us. That's the reality. What government does is creates a policy for us. What we've done is we brought this book out, which we launched last year, called Unleashing South Asia. It's got 20 projects from every country. These are not project wish lists. These are greenfield and brownfield projects that we have. We are actually going around South Asia and beyond to get investment. I'm pleased to say, since we launched this about 2.5 months ago, we've actually accomplished by getting about 6 investment MOUs signed, and there are another 12 under discussion. I feel this is what is going to break the barriers down. It's not to wait for the governments to do it. Just last point, we just agreed to form a company of South Asians. We had a very hard time. Where should we keep the headquarters? And we all finally agreed Singapore was the best place. And it's sad, but it's true. We've agreed that we will put it in Singapore because Singapore is the easiest place to do business. It's a lot easier for us to move to Singapore. It doesn't take us 20 hours to get from any of our countries to Singapore. It's the shortest point of destination. So we've actually formed a company. And what does this company do? It looks at all the fruits, dried fruits from Afghanistan. It looks at the onyx and the leather goods from Pakistan. It looks at the wonderful spices of India. It talks about the tea and cinnamon of Sri Lanka, the wonderful rugs and handicraft of Nepal, the beautiful garments from Bangladesh, the wonderful organic food that you get in Bhutan, the wonderful tuna you get in Maldives. We'll bring all this together from this company, from Singapore. We will start exporting them to South Asia and beyond. So we're not waiting for governments to do it. It's happening, because we know we can make it happen. So therefore, all I say to all our friends here is governments will do what they have to do. That's politics. Let them do it. But I don't think politics should lead us. I would request the people who are here to work with us, work with the people, work with the people, and probably the results will be much bigger. Thank you.
Working for the people and working with the people is different. Thank you. The organizers for the next summit should consider inviting private sector, business entrepreneur as one of the keynote speakers. It's not that we didn't really touch upon 4 given issues during our deliberations over here. Number 1 was, in the very beginning I said, it's in coma, of course, but it's not yet dead. So the second issue was about constituting or reconsidering to take initiative to form South Asia Economic Union, but there are a lot of unresolved conditionality left to accomplish this mission. So this is possible, but not impossible. The third issue was with regards to the reforming, revisiting existing secretariat charter, SAARC. So not much thoughts have been given in this particular issue. Maybe the panelists didn't get enough time to deliberate on that issue, and I expect that you would seriously consider these 4 issues. The last issue to submit it, to send this to the organizer for the next year's summit, and the pros and cons of sub-regional initiatives, and things, it all depends on how the bilateral, sub-regional, regional initiatives evolve. So you cannot just stop it. Even if we strengthen the SAARC, we cannot stop it. The major concern now is to talk about the interregional competitiveness, interregional trade and competitiveness. This issue that you did. Long time ago, I don't precisely remember. When Nagesh may remember, it was mostly 1.5 decades ago. Both of us did some work on that. So our findings, there was some sort of consensus, we all agree there is a lack of information about each other. We are not very much informed still about the input needs, economic opportunities, market level force, investment opportunities, export potentials, and inherent constraints. But some complementarity exists. For instance, it is not possible to provide the long list of the opportunities that are available in the region. But for instance, the modern engineering industries and also the automotive industries, including chemicals and allied products industries, have a major share in manufacturing value added in India. Pakistan has developed competence in science and technology in the fields of electronics. Hydropower potential is like a white gold for Nepal. Natural gas in Bangladesh and so forth. So, based on some identified cost-effective indicators, for instance, average labor cost per worker, similarly value added per unit of labor, and labor cost per unit of output. Based on these indicators, if you can identify most competitive products which have a good future in South Asian market and beyond that, then this may satisfy the long dream that we have been dreaming for the last several decades. Surprisingly, I was going through some available statistical information. After the Kargil War, after 7 or 8 months, if the total bilateral trade between Pakistan and India had increased. So, it is not only the misunderstanding, disrespect, suspicion, things like that. Business is business. So, based on some of the widely accepted cost competitive indicators, we may rethink about enhancing trade investment, as Suraj said. With this, I would like to wind up this plenary session. Thanks for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, speakers, and thank you, audience, for a very invigorating and very enriching session. Next, I would like to request Honorable Dr. Govinda Raj Bhatta, Member, National Planning Commission, to provide token of appreciation to all the speakers here. Thank you, Honorable Member Dr. Govindra Aswata. I have a small announcement for those of you who have traveled here from abroad. We have set up our reimbursement desk right next to the entrance where we had the registration desk yesterday. So if you could kindly proceed there with your invoice or boarding passes at your convenience, we will ensure that your reimbursement process will take place today. We have a session here starting in like 5 minutes. The parallel session that is going to happen here is unleashing the potential of intra-regional trade. So those of you who are interested to sit here for the session, you are welcome. And we have other parallel sessions arranged in the other sides of the building. There are 3 other parallel sessions happening near this hall. So we will be back in about 5 minutes, and thank you all for your participation.